Hey guys, what is up? It is Bibs7 here again, and welcome to another RuneScape 3 vlog here today. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Comp Cape rework, design changes, and what has been coming out in the past week or so as far as what Jagex has said, and what they have changed going forward as they move on to completely reworking the way the achievements basically work in the game and the capes you receive therein. Previously on the 12th, before I get into it, my apologies for not making too many videos this week. I had someone over at my apartment. One of my friends was staying over for the week, so I was not able to make too many videos, just the one for the Monday update. But we got this video coming out here, and then tomorrow I will be uploading another episode of the Hardcore Iron Man series for you guys to enjoy, and then we have a Monday vlog as well. So got a couple of videos coming out here in the next few days that you guys can look forward to. Anyways, moving on to the cape design and what they're changing. So previously on March 12th, they had stated that the Max Cape and Master Quest Cape would be being removed from the game entirely, and I thought that was a really dumb decision, and a lot of people agreed, and they've reverted that in that they are at least now going to be available as cosmetic options at some point during this new system. Obviously, I have the Comp Cape currently, so whether you think that makes my opinions more or less important is, I guess, up to you, but at least I know what you have to do and like go through to get this cape. And if I think, obviously it's going to be different for some people, their perspective, because of their PVM ability or tendency to do things in a group or solo. I primarily am a solo player personally, but it's just a fact of the matter that you have to do groups for things like raids, and I have, done that, gotten most of the Acto pieces. I haven't gone back since I got my Primeval top because that's all I really wanted, but I do have the Yakapet in my bank, and I could finish off these last two pieces without too much trouble. So, but I mean, it just goes to show that my favorite boss in the game that I have the most KC at is a solo boss and the hardest solo boss in the game. So it just goes to show you that I am personally a primarily solo player. Just wanted to put that out there, and that is how my perspective is going forward into this discussion. But they listed at the top of their doc, and I apologize, I didn't read the whole design doc. It's a lot, and I just don't think it's worth my time to read all of it. But if I miss out on something important, you guys can let me know. But my apologies, I just don't really have the time or the attention span to read this entire document, which is 9 pages long. Anyways, they list 4 major problems, which I'm going to go into each one of them and my opinions on them, of the current design of the Comp Cape and achievement system in general. So the first problem they list is the enormous utility and stat benefits the completionist capes provide. So obviously the Comp Cape itself is the best in slot cape in terms of stats by a mile, and it also has all these teleports, max guild, monastery, manor farm, summoning restore, the skeletal horror, and you can also put the perks in it. So this, according to them, this causes 2 major issues. The first of which is players who most benefit from the stats and utilities on comp aren't always the same players who enjoy the challenge of completing comp requirements. And I agree with this, definitely. This definitely makes sense to me. Like, if you're someone who only wants to PVM and you don't really like skilling too much, you're not really going to want to get 120 dungeoneering in order to get the best cape in the game for your PVM. I'm kind of one of those people, but I am also a completionist type player in almost every game that I play, so I didn't have too much problem going for the 120 dungeoneering. There's not too much, like Livid Farm could be considered part of that as well, but in my opinion, no cape requirements for the Comp Cape are too much on their own. It's just the amalgamation of all of them at once to require the Comp Cape that makes it a bit too much for a lot of people. The second problem they list is the Comp Cape is the only cape worth wearing, which means there is no strategy to the slot and no reason to be excited if we release new capes. And I fail to see how this is a problem with the Comp Cape and not a problem with them being afraid to release a cape stronger than it. They basically talk about how as a result of this rework, they'll be allowed or be able to release new capes with that are better than the Comp Cape from, like as boss drops, I assume. But I just don't see how that is not possible to do currently. Obviously, the comp cape has really, really good stats and it's really strong, but I mean, almost every boss that comes out introduces some form of power creep into the game, and I fail to see how they are avoiding that with the cape slot just because, and just blaming it on the cape itself. It might be due to the fact that a lot of people would get upset if their cape they worked really hard for was no longer the best in the game, but that can be, again, said with anything. Like, if I worked really hard to get this Noxious Scythe, and then Telos comes out with the ZGS and is better than the Scythe, obviously doesn't have the range, whatever, not the point. You know, am I going to get all upset and rage? Like, not really. Like, my Scythe is still good. The comp cape would still be good, but it just wouldn't be the best, and you'd likely have to pay a premium price to get the best if they were talking about a tradable cape here. Although, you know, ever since the fire cape, really, the best capes in the game have been untradeable. So that's another interesting point that they don't really touch on, I don't think. But I just fail to see how them not being able to release a better cape is a problem with the cape and not with their approach to design. But maybe I'm wrong on that front. So that was the first problem, which actually ended up being two problems. So the second one they list is how the consistency of how requirements are added to weekly releases. And this is 100% not a fault of the comp cape. This is a fault of Jagex themselves being either lazy, stupid, or scared to release new comp requirements, which I don't understand at all. In my opinion, anything that is like has a new achievement related to it should be added to the comp cape for the most part, aside from the things that are, you know, extra or like super extra that, you know, you would only include for the trim comp. But it shouldn't be that hard to distinguish the difference between something that would go on, you know, comp or not, in my opinion. And it's been evident over the past couple of months that they are just not even bothering to add new comp requirements. Let me quickly pull up the, you know, recent updates so I can see if I can find some sort of example. Obviously, we've recently had a lot of obvious additions like the new quest, the new boss, another new quest in February from Chef's Assistant, and then obviously the mining and smithing rework had to have some comp requirements added as well. So this year has kind of been relatively obvious for what they should and shouldn't add, in my opinion. But if I go back to last year quickly, if I could, taking a bit, oh, I have to visit the archive, right? Okay, so 2018, let's see, December. What do we have in December? We did obviously have a quest in December. Was that the only thing that came out? It looks like it was. Well, shoot, that doesn't... Well, that's just a, oh, what the hell, mimic skill token. So a bit all over the place here, but we have November here. There was that Slime is of the Essence event and another quest. So definitely not having the best examples here because obviously quests are going to be added and those were the only updates really in the recent past. And then I remember October was an absolute shit month. We basically had nothing. So anyways, it's just been a thing that's been, you know, pretty clear over the past year or so that they are just not adding requirements to the comp cape. In my opinion, the player-owned farm should have had further requirements aside from just unlocking all the music tracks, which was a bit strange to me. Like, it wasn't like the requirement isn't even tied to the farm itself at all. Technically, you don't really need, but you can buy the seasonalizer to accelerate the requirement by a lot, but you can just not do that and get the music tracks once every 4 months and or 3 months and you'll have them all. So they didn't even, you know, you don't even have to interact with the farm at all to do that, which I think is pretty stupid. They should have definitely added something additional to that. But looking back in time here, it's not becoming super evident, but the player-owned farm is one good example, I would say, and then other than that, it's mostly been a lot of garbage patch weeks, quests, or bosses, which are guaranteed to be added. But something like the Hall of Memories that came out late or early last year, there was a comp requirement added to it, but it was like very, very basic part of the the whatever you call it activity. Like there was another requirement that you have, or another thing you have to do to get a title there, and I don't see why that wasn't just made the comp requirement as well. But that's just my opinion. It's generally just a failure on their part to add these requirements, and they list the reason as everyone loses their cape utility, which isn't fun for anyone. Just add a fucking grace period. I don't understand why that seems to be so hard. They've brought this up in the past that this is a problem. Nobody wants comp requirements because they remove their comp cape. Just add a 1 or 2 week grace period to allow people to complete the content and then get their cape back before they lose it. They did this with 120 Slayer. They gave you like 3 months, maybe more, to get your requirement. I don't know why they just haven't done that with everything since then. Doesn't make any sense. So they say they're wary of adding new comp requirements, which I don't know. This just seems like a shortcoming on their part rather than a problem with the cape itself once again. The third big problem they listed here is that some players don't like certain specific requirements, mainly Reaper, Title, and Castle Wars. Reaper has 2 closely related issues. It adds hard PVM and forced group content as requirements, which locks out players who can't or won't do either of those things. And let me just say, if there's a requirement on there that someone won't do, it's not a problem with the requirement that they don't want to do it. Now, can't do it is a different discussion entirely. I mean, I don't really believe that people can't do things. They just don't feel like trying or learning to do it. Because I have a friend who is, who barely has use of like his arms at all. I don't think he does, even just like his hands, and he uses a touch screen, and he has comp cape. He's done Solok. I've done Solok kills with him. So that just shows me that nothing in the game is impossible to do if you put enough time and effort into learning how to do it and actually trying. A lot of people will just look at Telos or raids and just be like, I can never do that. I'm just not even going to bother trying. Or they'll do Telos once or twice and die a couple times and be like, I give up. And the fact that they then say, I can't do it is just kind of bullshit if you ask me. I don't think, I'm not trying to be elitist or anything, but nothing in this game is like insanely hard to do currently if you try for it long enough. Solok is definitely quite tough. It is I would say an outlier in terms of difficulty in the normal game. I would say for me Telos is a lot easier, but I've been doing it for a long time. I'd actually say it took me much longer to learn Solok properly than it did Telos, but I had already done a bunch of PVM before doing Solok. But I would say 7-man Solok really isn't all that hard. It's only the problem is getting the people to do it. Duo is quite tough. But still, I don't think it'd be that ridiculous to ask one of every boss kill to get the completionist cape. It's part of its content in the game, and you should have to complete all the content to get the completionist cape. I don't know. That's just my opinion. But they said we'll need to decide whether or not these requirements do belong on comp and what that means for the game. Now, Castle Wars is a different thing entirely. I don't think that should be on trim. I don't have trim, so I can't really say, but it just seems like it's such a ridiculous outlier in terms of the amount of time it takes. And it's like a really arbitrary thing too. Like there are many other mini games in the game that have similar outfits and stuff like that to Castle Wars, but you don't have to get any of those. Imagine if they made you get a full outfit from fucking Trouble Brewing. Like people would just never get trim if that was the case, probably. But I don't know. It just seems like a real outlier and a strange requirement to have. But I mean, something like the Reaper is not, it's completely different to that. Like, I don't know. I'm having trouble articulating my thoughts, as seems to be the case often in my videos, but that's just my opinion on that. I just think that the Castle Wars requirement is a bit ridiculous. Like, I would 100% go for comp trim if that didn't exist. But since it does exist, I'm not going to spend 80 plus days within a single mini game. That's just ridiculous. The fourth problem they have, and this one just sounds like bullshit fluff to me, The fourth problem is the lack of objectives to aim for. Once you're maxed and you've completed all quests, the next thing to aim for is Comp Cape, which is quite a lofty achievement, which I don't necessarily even agree with that. I don't think it's a lofty achievement to get Comp. If you're not going to Comp, you don't really have much else to aim for, which is just not the case at all. You can go for Insane Final Boss, which is harder than Comp, but you can, or just a singular boss collection, or even just a boss pet, or something like that. Or you could go for all the skilling pets, go for all the combat related pets, all skill pets in general. There's plenty of other things to do. Master Quest Cape is there. And if those things, that's like the whole game. So if you're not interested in doing any of those things, then you don't want to play the game at all. It has nothing to do with the Comp Cape. So I don't agree with that last problem at all. People that don't want to go for Comp have plenty of other things to get involved with once they get max. I was not comped for quite a long time after maxing, and had no problem, just going and doing some other bosses. Got my Dormant title, my Silver Warden, stuff like that. Just fine to do. I had no problem doing those instead of going for Comp. So that sounds like bullshit to me, but you guys can let me know your thoughts. So that is their problems and my opinions to them. Now we're moving on to the proposed changes. And these changes are happening whether, I or we all like it or not. They're doing some sort of rework. So, get ready for it. Basically, they're planning on splitting all the achievements up into a tier within their category from 1 to 3. And you can complete all of the achievements within a tier, within a category, to earn a cape, I believe, for that tier from that category. So you would get, they show on here skills, combat, lore, exploration, minigames, and miscellaneous. So you could complete all the tier 1 lore achievements and receive the tier 1 lore cape, which would be replacing the quest cape apparently. And they said that thankfully these are going to have names by the time they come out. It's not going to be called lore tier 1, because if that happened I would just be like, Jesus Christ. But I don't know. And that kind of proliferates throughout all the rest of the sections. So this, I mean, I don't know. That sounds okay, I guess. I really don't want them to actually make a cape for minigames, because almost all the minigames in this game are fucking dead. Like, they need to rework like so many of them, but they have treasure trails and ports under here. Wait, what? Are those all the minigame ones? Oh no, they have pest control. Yeah. I hope they. I don't want to have to do things like that to get my comp back, but it just. I mean, if they want to be consistent about it, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But they say this will provide stepping stones between, like, say, maxing and getting the end game capes, because you'd have milestones along the way, which I guess is fair. Though I really don't think that it is important to have that. In my opinion, basically because of the game this is. Like, I don't want this game to turn into something where they hold your hand the entire fucking way along, but we'll have to see if that's how it's going. They also say this will address the inconsistent comp cape requirements, which I guess makes sense, but again, that's their own problem and their own fault for doing that. The next thing they talk about is the non-stat cape bonuses, like teleports and stuff, I believe, which would be apparently tied to the player instead of the cape itself. So when you unlock the item rewards, like being able to teleport to, I don't know, skeletal horror on the cape here, you would be able to, like, use that teleport on any cape you wear, which sounds kind of weird, but I guess kind of makes sense. However, I don't want every cape to have like a fucking paragraphs list of options on it, and at the same time I don't want to have to click activate and then choose from a paragraphs list of options. So I don't know if this is the best idea for it, but sorry, I'm not, my voice is rusty right now. I'm not ready to do commentaries. Got to get back into the swing of things, but it sounds weird. It kind of is something you'll have to see how it goes when it comes out. But next up, they talk about something which seems very strange to me, but Apparently, they want to add implicit stats to the player after completing certain requirements. So like they say, if you have combat tier 1 cape, you'd gain a passive of plus 11 armor, 3 prayer bonus, and 5 to each style at all times, which seems kind of strange and definitely would result in some power creep because it won't take up a slot and you can just wear a cape on top of that. And I don't know, it sounds like it'd be OP, but I don't know. It just seems like such a weird thing. Like, how would they show that? Like, how would you remember what you have and don't have in terms of stats? They say here, for example, the Tokar Call Cat gives plus 44 armor, 2 prayer, and 31 strength, but with the tier 1 combat achievements completed, it would become 55 armor, 5 prayer, 36 strength, 5 range, and 5 magic. So, I don't know. Seems kind of weird, but I guess it would make the cape drops matter, which is, again, in my opinion, not a problem, but Then they go and talk about the new comp cape, so there would be tier 1, 2, and 3 of that. And to get it, you just have to complete all the tier 1 achievements of every category, which I guess makes sense, although I don't want to have to do mini games. God, it's so terrible. They then talk about the grace periods, which they seem to be doing in a very strange way. I don't understand why they can't just give it a 2-week time period of, you know, you can complete, if you complete the content in this time, and if it's like a really big piece of content, they can make it a longer amount of time. I mean, it doesn't have to be hard, it's set. But they're talking about doing a lockdown week every 6 months on a specific schedule. And until that week, anything released after the last lockdown but before this one will have to be complete. You don't have to complete until the lockdown happens. So, I don't know. It seems weird because then, like, you wouldn't really feel the need to do it at all, and then it kind of become like a procrastination thing if it's something you don't want to do, which might not be good when it's coming up on lockdown week and you have to do all this bullshit. But yeah, I just feel like it would make more sense to just have it be just a set period of time, or like, you know, make it a couple weeks for every update. But yeah, that is that. They then talk about freezing existing comp and trimmed comp capes. So they're going to basically let people like me who already have the cape keep their legacy version and be renamed. But they would keep all their existing requirements. They would still be obtainable and could still be worn. And they would never have any requirements added, changed, or removed. However, they wouldn't have stats or non-stat benefits. So that seems weird. But you'd still have the access to them because of the cape, the all capes having them, I guess. So that means if you are working towards comp, you can keep going and you'll still be able to have it. Or if you already have it, you'll keep it, which I guess is obviously good. Lastly, they talk about controversial requirements, namely Reaper and Castle Wars. They say here the Reaper requirements will be spread out amongst the tiers of combat cape. We haven't assigned specific bosses to tiers yet, but we'll make sure this is published well in advance. So obviously, things like Telos, Solok, Raids are likely to be tier 3 combat requirements and will no longer be required for the tier 1 of Completionist Cape. And I actually like this approach. That seems fair to me. And then the Castle Wars requirement will either be found on a high tier of minigame cape or will only exist on the Legacy Trim Comp Cape. And they definitely should make it only exist on the Legacy Trim Comp Cape, because if they put it on the high tier of minigame cape, they're going to have to put on all like the other bullshit minigames in their outfits too. Otherwise, it's just not consistent, and they're trying to go for consistency with this. Just axe the Legacy, or axe the Castle Wars requirement, make it Legacy, and then I can actually maybe go for Trim. So that's pretty much it. They go through an FAQ, but I don't have any real questions at this point. It seems okay, a little bit strange, especially the implicit stats, and the grace period lockdown week system is a bit of a strange approach as well. But I don't know. I guess like things like this, you kind of just got to see how they play out and how they go. Don't get too butthurt if, you know, you lose your max cape, or you won't lose your max cape. I don't know what I'm talking about, but don't get too butthurt about it until it actually happens. These things, like the mining and smithing rework, for me, I was not looking forward to at all, but since it's come out, and since the second beta, I actually love it a lot. So don't hate on the new designs until they're actually fully fleshed out and the update is coming. So yeah, those are just my thoughts on the comp rework, design changes, and proposals. Let me know yours in the comments down below, and please, if you don't mind, if you leave a comment, let me know as well if you are either like maxed, comped, trimmed, or anything like that, just so I can kind of get a perspective of where you're coming from on your thoughts. Thanks for checking out the video, you guys. Hardcore Iron Man tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Peace out.